The meeting password is wrong.
Maybe you should really. Hello, so we are about to start in a few minutes.
Please, wait. Meeting password is incorrect. Re-enter, please.
Should I use this with my laptop?
Yes.
Because when I talk, I should go there, sit there, and
you just sit here and use this computer, this laptop, but just put here. So yeah, just let it here. So don't go there.
Or what? This computer.
Just join the meeting room. Okay, let me. So you are enter, right? Okay.
You should enable also the hearing. I mean,
we can
not
shut
you,
down the.
but
Empezar en un minuto. Hasta el audio no escucha bien. Tenemos que cortar la luz. Elena sale negro.
Is he French?
Rápido, ¿no?
no.
Is he?
Pero
I cannot listen this.
¿Sí? ¿Por qué? No lo sé.
hello everyone. So thank you for waiting a few minutes until the other participant join.
I don't know where it is. I don't know, 3 or 4 days ago, I left.
And then it disappear?
I don't know where.
Yeah. Claro. Maybe with the headphones it's better. Yeah, we can use this one.
Good job.
Sí, ábrelo. Ábrelo. Okay, can everybody hear? Can you hear? Okay, yeah, so I think we may start. I hope everybody can hear me. If you have any trouble, you can maybe write on the group.
Have to accept.
With the phones, headphones is really strange. So as I said, if you have any trouble in hearing us, you can use the chat, the group chat. And okay, so we might start. This is a webinar about conflict management resolution that will be implemented for the project Steps for Lead, which is co-founded by the European Commission and in particular the Erasmus Plus program. In the project Steps for Lead, I am currently doing a job shadowing in Hanoi, in Vietnam, in an association that works with youth that is called S3 Vietnam, that stands for Solidarity Jeunesse Vietnam. And the person that I'm currently job shadowing, which is Miss Lin, coordinator in SJ, will briefly introduce you the activities of the association. And after that, a volunteer will tell you what has been his experience in the association, just to have a hint of what SJ is doing in Hanoi, in the country. And after that, we will go through the main topic, which is conflict and how to deal with it, and also how to solve it, how to arrive to a solution to resolve it. Okay, so speech to Miss Lin.
Hi everyone, I'm Lin, engineer and government project coordinator at SJ Vietnam, and joined this webinar is Matthew, and I'd like to introduce you a little bit about Vietnam. I think most of people know about Vietnam, so I think I can share a little bit, not so it doesn't take time. Yeah, so Matthew can continue with the no, Taka, my volunteer, will continue to talk about his experience in Hanoi with Agile Vietnam. Here in Agile Vietnam, we every year we organize short-term and long-term projects. In certain projects, we have group camp and work camp like other NGO in Vietnam or in international NGO in the world. And normally the short-term project will lengthen about like 1 week to 3 weeks. And our short-term projects include project related to renovation, environmental, non-education, and some other topics that we have disadvantaged children, like poor people or minority in rural areas or in mountainous areas. For the long-term projects, the volunteer should work in about 1 month through to 1 year. It depends on the time management that the volunteers can work with us. And one of the long-term project is supported by European Commission. As you know, it is called EVS project. And working with these projects, the volunteer will work in Agile Vietnam normally in about 6 months. Yeah, and the volunteer work here to help the children living in poor areas, in rural villages. And the volunteer can also teach English to students, university students, to help them to improve their English skills. And one of the projects that I am managing is working with disability, with intellectual disability, that the children and youngsters, they get problem with mental health, and the volunteer go there to take care of them, to teach them with life skills, and to how to help themselves, how to do many very basic things to their family, to burden the society. So and yeah, it's also very and we have just finished the project with a French volunteer in 4 months in this project. And one more project we organize in Hanoi is helping a social school which is collect many young people from about 16 years old until to 27 years old who want to join vocational training. And they are come from different rural villages or even in Hanoi and minority areas or mountainous areas. So, and they are also deaf people, and the social school help them to to support them the school fees, and also the accommodation they have free. And we support volunteers to help them to improve their English skills, and also to help the social school to promote their project, to promote their services, so they can get the sustainable development. And in Vietnam, now we have 8 in long-term projects. We have 8 projects in different sites, about 20 sites in 15 different cities and provinces in Vietnam. And every year we receive around average of the volunteers, around 60 volunteers per year. And about the short-term volunteers, every year SJ Vietnam receive about 130 volunteers. This is the average of the volunteer in working in short-term projects. Yeah. So, Taka, can you continue with your experience? And if you have any question about SJ Vietnam, yeah, please let me know.
Hello everyone, I'm Taka. I'm a long-term volunteer from Japan. I'm working at the office of SJ Vietnam from December to this January. After I came to Vietnam, I met a lot of volunteers from different countries. So I'd like to introduce some volunteers in SJ Vietnam I met until tomorrow, until today. In SJ Vietnam, we have several long-term volunteers. Two of them is working at a school for disadvantaged, disabled children, and they seems very enjoyable. So they are working every day, and they enjoyed their work every day. So, so I'm surprised at them because before I came here, I didn't know this kind of people who is working for children or for disabled people and really enjoyed their work. So I was very surprised. And also we have some work camp. Work camp is short-term volunteer. And last month, so December 2020, we had a work camp for local people in Hanoi. We have one project site named Fisher Village. Fisher Village, in Fisher Village, many local people live, and they don't have they don't have enough money for to live, to handle their life. So last month, we had a program for Fisher Village people. 11 volunteers came to Hanoi from Japan, and they helped the local people to make money for with Eco Sponge. Eco Sponge is a kind of sponge, but this is made from wool, made of wool. So Japanese volunteers bring a lot of wool from Japan and gave the local people, and local people made this eco sponge, a lot of eco sponge, and another Japanese volunteer bring back this eco sponge to Japan and sell. And from this income, a Japanese volunteer gave a part of this income to local people in Fisher Village. So 11 Japanese volunteers are working in Fisher Village about 1 week, and I think they really enjoyed their volunteering. And this month, so January 2020, we had another volunteer, another workshop, work camp. This is a traditional New Year for poor children and family. So in this work camp, we made a traditional chin cake. Chin cake is
Savory sticky rice.
Cake for New Year's. So we made a lot of New Year's cake and gave our children in school, disabled children in school, and we gave this cake to local people in Fisher Village. And through this work camp, about seven volunteers came to Hanoi. Three is from South Korea, two is from China, one is from Denmark, and one is from Switzerland. And they enjoyed not only volunteering, but also exchanging culture through living together or having party together. So through, I saw with my eyes this true program, and through this program, I feel the international volunteering is really important for local people in the world, especially in developing countries. So so sorry. So I feel volunteering is really important. So our role, so we should spread information about international volunteering more and more in the world. And I hope more and more people in the world know about international volunteering, and more people come to our country, or come to Vietnam, or not only Vietnam, come to a lot of countries which need international help. Okay, so
yeah,
my story is okay over. That's it. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, do you have any questions for us about SJ Vietnam and about our activities? Can you hear us? Richa, can you hear us?
Hi,
Hi, hello.
can you see me?
He's talking.
So we have just finished introduction about SJ Vietnam. So do you have any question for us?
Hello.
Okay, then I think we can proceed. Okay, we have a message. We can see and hear you. It was very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so before I forgot to say where I come from. So as Lynn said, my name is Matilde. I'm job shadowing Miss Lynn currently, and I come from Italy. So this is UNET, my sending organization, and this is the amazing logo of SJ Vietnam, that is my hosting organization here in Hanoi. And so now I would like to start with the main topic, which is, of course, conflict management and its resolution. So first of all, I think that in international youth work, we should consider our differences. In the Erasmus Plus program, we consider difference and diversity as a value. So when it comes about this topic, I think that cross-cultural studies are very interesting and connected to how to communicate with each other. So what I did is a little bit of research on the Hofstede website, which is a website of a professor that is working for decades in the topic of cross-cultural research. And what I found out about Vietnam is that, first of all, in Vietnam, Vietnam is kind of a place, a country where people accept hierarchy. So people accept a hierarchy order. They consider that everybody has a place in society and they cannot question that. Furthermore, Vietnam is a collectivistic society, considering that the collectivistic society is the opposite of an individualistic society. So in Vietnam, loyalty overrides most other societal rules. Loyalty is very valued, it's very important. And in such a society, they foster strong relationships, either in family or in work, and everyone in those relationships must take responsibility for the fellow members of the group. And I found this trait very, very positive personally. When it comes about conflict, according to Hofstede's insights, in Vietnam, conflicts are resolved by compromise and negotiation, mostly. So, people also value free time and flexibility, and they focus on well-being. They don't focus as much on the status. They don't want to show up their status, but they will focus on the balance and the well-being in their life. Furthermore, a manager is considered effective when it's supportive, and the decision is to involving the members of the group. Also, people, according to the study in Vietnam, think that there should be no role much than necessarily. And as an Italian, I really agree, because we have a lot of useless rules. So meaning that if the rules or the law is ambiguous and doesn't work, they should be abandoned or they should be changed. So it's very pragmatic. So regarding cross-culture, we should do a very important distinction, that is from the national culture and the organizational culture. So when dealing with people, of course, if you deal with a single person, for example, Lynn, in communicating, I will notice more her personal trait, her personality, her characteristic, her good qualities. She has many, of course. But then if I interact with a small group of Vietnamese people, for example, I will not maybe be able to spot, I will maybe spot some similarities, but maybe not. Maybe it will be very hard for me to find any common traits in them. But when interacting with a very large group of people, there is when the national traits becomes more evident. Think, for example, of a group that is attending a conference, a very group of hundreds of Vietnamese people. There, the individual traits will be very difficult to spot, and the cultural Vietnamese traits will be more evident. So we should consider that, I think, in cooperation with people, no, in order to communicate effectively and to prevent conflict, to know each other, of course, know each other culture, which is so interesting also. The difference between national culture and organizational culture. Of course, SJ Vietnam has its own culture, its own values. Its motto is to step for the growth of the people, the solidarity, and to improve the society in Vietnam through international volunteering. So, of course, the association has its own culture. What is the difference between the national and the organizational culture? Is more that national culture is focused on the values, and organizational culture is focused on the process, how we do things. And this is why organizational culture is more easy to change, while national culture is harder, if not quite impossible, very difficult to change, because it's based on core values, what we think is right, what we think is worth living for, what is important. So I will check if you guys write some question while I'm while I'm talking. Okay, so the second topic I would like to talk about is related to emotional intelligence. With cross-culture, I think emotional intelligence should be considered when we talk about conflict, because it is a key competence. What is emotional intelligence, first of all? So it's the ability to bring coherence between our bodily sensation, our feelings, and our thoughts. Because according to modern science, it turns out that we don't have just a brain in our head, but we own 3 brains, because the modern definition of brain is an entity with neural connection. And a lot of neural connection have been founded also in the gut region and in the region of the heart. So actually, we function as creators using those 3 brains. And emotional intelligence is the ability to bring coherence between those 3 brains. We experience the world through these 3 brains, right? So how can we bring coherence between what we feel in our body, what we feel in our heart, and what we think? First of all, we should be able to name those feelings, to sense the feeling, to name them, and that's how you make coherence when experiencing them. And so, yeah, it is very important to know how to respond in the correct way. This is about communication in general. And after that, I would like to go a little bit deeper in the topic of conflict management. So, first of all, the reasons of why conflict appears. Conflict appears sadly for several number of reasons that can be personal. For example, we start a conflict because I need confidence, you need trust, you think this is challenging for you, or you want to be appreciated, or I want to be appreciated. So personal reasons. Second of all, it can be about our values. We have very different values, either be personal or cultural or political, but we differ in our values, what we think is important. Third of all, it's about the interest. So we disagree on how to share the resources. We don't have the same power when sharing the resources, and the resources can be money, can be time, can be also things or space, and this is when the conflict may arise. And last but not the least, the instrumental reason. So when we have conflict on the goals and disagree on your method, on your practice, on your procedure, on how you do things. So considering all these reasons, the common trait is that when there is diversity, then the conflict may appear. But conflict is not just about prejudice and discrimination. I personally would like to focus in this webinar on seeing a conflict as an opportunity, because when you really understand the difference of the other, its value, its knowledge, and understand how to use the difference of the other person, then you can find very creative solution. So after a conflict, not every conflict is inherently bad. Some conflict come to grow, to improve ourselves personally or in an organization. So after a conflict, you can achieve a better state of things. So if you see conflict as an opportunity, then it becomes much more positive as a concept, I would say. And of course, there are different levels of conflicts. So first of all, we have to agree on what conflict is for us. conflict can be at the first level very little. It can be just a simple disagreement, and then it can, for example, turn into personifying the conflict, so identifying the actual problem with the person that has another opinion than ours. Then we can, if the conflict escalates even more, we can extend the problem. So for example, at the beginning it was really a very tiny disagreement, and after that we tend to see everything that this person is doing as part of the initial problem, when it actually doesn't have nothing to do with the initial problem. And then the second step in escalation of the conflict would be giving up on dialogue. So I don't consider dialogue useful anymore. I give up. I don't want to talk with you anymore. I think it's not worth to talk with you anymore. And after that, there is the creation of an enemy image. So I identify my opponent as a sort of an enemy. And then even more, if the conflict escalates, we can arrive to an open hostility where we don't even, I don't know, look ourselves. We really want ourselves to be. Okay, I have a question. Does emotional intelligence help completely in solving organizational conflict? I don't think it helps completely, but I think it's an excellent starting point for everyone. I don't know if I should answer writing in the chat or telling it by voice. Okay, I will tell by voice. So yes, I think to start, if the topic interests you, there is Daniel Goleman work, but then I can share my resources if you like. And there is a lot of that also in Salto Youth, the platform for the tools of youth worker. There is an amazing manual on emotional intelligence, and I really suggest that if you think it can be useful. But personally, I really value the concept of emotional intelligence. I think it can really help in our communication. So I hope I was clear in answering, and I will go on. And also, as you can see, we have a super tree because the year is about to finish here. It didn't really started, so we have this tree to celebrate the new year to come. So we wish you a happy new Vietnamese year according to the lunar calendar. We're also really scared because the tree may fall at any moment, but we will be we will be very careful, we promise, and so that no conflict arises with the tree. So as I was saying, there are different levels of conflict, right? And what can we do? There are things that escalate the conflict. I don't know if you can really see it, but of course there are traits, there are ways of communicating. Yes. I will just... there are behaviors that escalate to the conflict. So from a disagreement, you may have a real strong opponent. If you do something such as interrupting the person, asking question, asking very close question, so question that can be answered just with a yes or a no. Ignoring the person, using closed body language, so keeping distance, closing arms and legs, things like that. Or furthermore, focusing on the person instead of focusing on the actual problem, because it turns immediately into blaming the other person. Also, generalize and focusing more on the past, maybe a way of communicate that escalates the conflict. So, and also making use statement. I think that every human really dislikes is to hear from others what you are feeling. When I tell you, you are feeling angry because, no one likes that. No one likes when we assume our feelings and our thoughts. So it's much more convenient for us, if we want to de-escalate the conflict, to use as many I statements as possible. So what is an I statement? It's a statement where I assess my own feeling, my own thoughts, trying to involve as less as possible the person I'm referring to. So that we don't assume his feeling or his thoughts before he has the right to, or she has the right to express himself or herself. Also, it's better to focus on the future instead of focusing on the past. It's much more constructive. What else? Furthermore, instead of generalizing, we can give examples, being as much concrete as possible. To show understanding, we can focus on the actual problem instead of focusing on the person and blaming the person. So really trying to focus on the actual argument. Of course, also asking open questions. So as open as possible, so that the other person has the ability to express himself, his point. Show interest also through, of course, questions and also body language. So be turned in the direction of the person. Like when communicating, our nonverbal language counts at least as much as the content that we are saying. So we might be the best speaker ever, but if our body language is closed and hostile, the other person will just perceive that no, you don't want to talk with them, you don't want to actually solve the problem, you don't want to be constructive, and the conflict may escalate very quickly. So there are, of course, many different solutions for each degree, for different level of conflicts. Let's say that different level for conflict have different solution. But I think it's much more useful to, how to say, talk about general strategies of conflict management instead of focusing to different solutions that are very, very particular. Also because this content is available on Salto, as well as the content regarding emotional intelligence, as I said before. So what do we want when we solve a conflict? We want to step from my position and your position to a common position, a position where everybody wins. And this is where the creative solution is found. It's not that I give up my point of view and you give up your own point of view. Through communication, the objective, the goal should be to find a solution that satisfies both parties. I know that it sounds kind of utopistic, but with a good communication, I'm sure it's reachable. So one communication strategy that you can use to reach that is to concentrate both on the fact and on the process. No, I think there is a method for conflict management not only EQ can solve. Yes, I agree with Fouque that is saying that there is a method for conflict management and not just emotional intelligence is the way, because emotional intelligence is still, as far as I know, something very personal. So of course it improves your self-awareness, but then you have to communicate with others. So a communication strategy, as I said, is to focus on as well on the facts as well as on the relation. But then again, it really depends on the person that you have in front of you and also on the culture. There maybe in some culture it's absolutely not appropriate in some circumstances to talk about your feelings, but it's more effective to focus on the facts, on the what you want to solve in a very practical way. and it's really inappropriate to put the feeling to solve the question. So then it can be very delicate. So you should find a balance between the relationship is going and what are the facts, like the concrete facts. Then I think there are three main, how to say, there are three main and very popular, in my opinion, strategies when it comes to an effective communication to prevent conflict. So as we said, iMessages is one. The second would be active listening. And the third one would be how to give a constructive feedback. But personally, I think those three methods are really, really popular. And there is a lot of very good content on the web that you can easily find simply Googling them, and also many examples that you can stream and video. So if you don't know about them, we can discuss later, like in the part for the questions, but I think you can easily reach that content on the website. So iMessages, active listening, and how to give a constructive feedback with the hamburger image. The hamburger method. So what I would like to focus to end our webinar would be a technique of arguing that is called steel manning. So it comes from the word steel man, so a man made of steel, very, very strong. And who is the steel man? The steel man is actually the polar opposite of the straw man. The straw man is made of straws, so it's very, very weak. And the steel man is very, very strong, but not because he's a bad person and he says bad word when arguing. No, the steel man, instead of simplifying and making a parody of the speech of his opponent or her opponent, is sincerely trying to understand the point of view of the person that he's talking to, right? So it's the attempt, and there I'm just reading the definition, it's the attempt to re-express your target position so clearly, so vividly and fairly that your target says, thanks, I wish I thought of putting it that way. So it is really the sincere effort, a genuine effort to understand each other's point of view. And you can do that starting, for example, with if I understand correctly, and trying to rephrase what your opponent, according to you, said in the most genuine and sincere way possible. And you may say, why would you do that? No, when you're arguing, you want to make your point of view to be the winner, not the opponent point of view to be the winner. You want your own reasons to be heard and not his or her reasons to be heard. Actually, it's true. It's a hard debate technique, let's say like that. But finding the best form of your opponent's argument and then arguing with this, you only make your argument stronger. Because if you make the argument of your opponent weaker, then you just make your own argument weaker. So it is an approach that is also widely used in the scientific community, because it's a sincere attempt to find if we, in our own personal point of view, in our own personal argument, we are actually saying something very stupid. So this is a sincere attempt to find a common solution. So while the strawman is dishonest and misrepresentative, sorry for Italian, this word is very, very complicated. The steel man makes a sincere attempt to understand and summarize an opposing. While the straw man aims to confuse, the steel man aims to clarify. And while the straw man is likely to cause harm, the steelman acts in good faith and is likely to reduce harm. So of course, this is a more tougher debate tactic, because then you have fewer shady arguments. But the result, I think, is much more creative and much more effective in finding a solution. And also on steel manning, there are so many examples on the YouTube of great thinker and people that are I think extraordinarily competent, that just debate with each other, and it's actually a very funny debating technique. I saw one of these where two thinkers end up their argument by saying, okay, next time you will just write my book, because they are so strong in expressing their opponent point of view. They put themselves in their shoes, and so their own argument then are really strong. And I think you can apply that not just to debating technique, but also in everyday life. Like if you ask to someone if he prefers dogs or cats, and Miss Lynn would answer, what do you answer? Do you prefer dogs or cats?
Actually, I prefer dog.
Okay, Miss Lynn. And so this, a strong man, in my case, a strong woman would say, so that means that you hate cats. For example, I would like be really opponent, but she never said that. So the steel man, on the contrary, will try to understand, like, so if I understand correctly, you like dogs more because they're so cute, and when they're happy, I don't know, why is that? Because they shake their tail. So I really try to make her point much strong as I can. And so then I will be able to prove that no, cats are the best. I'm definitely a cat person. So I hope I was clear in explaining the stillman technique. And the last part I would like to talk about, I think we have some little time. So after this technique of still manning, would be the 5-finger model. This is more about communication in youth work. As I assume that the majority of people that are looking at this webinar are youth worker, or at least connected with the Board of International Volunteering. And also, the 5-finger model is a model composed of 5 elements, as you may imagine, that talks about the fundamental skills for every person that is willing to facilitate a process. So when we say facilitate, we mean to hold, for example, a group activity, such as a workshop, such as a training, so an activity implemented with other people, a group of people, and the facilitator is the one that is aware of the different steps. I hope everyone is clear what a facilitation process is. Okay, Zoom says my internet connection isn't stable. Okay, I hope everyone is there. So the most critical skills for a facilitators are, on the first finger, the outcomes. So being aware of what are the outcomes that you would like to achieve through the activity that you facilitate. Second of all, it would be your questioning skills. So if you lead an activity, a workshop, a training, you should have in mind very high quality sequential questions. What does it mean? That are questions that serves your outcome, and questions that are asked in a good sequence at the right time, at the right moment. So sometimes you have to ask questions to your group of participants that are the so-called chunk up questions. If, for example, your participants are getting lost in the weeds during the activity, or they're getting upset with one another, you need to ask a question that goes upper level. So that is a chunking up question. So a chunking up question may be what this is all about. What are we doing right now? What is the most important thing that we can achieve together? So that would be a chunking up question. But also, many cases, you may want to do when it comes about strategies, you may want to go into deep questioning, right? So you will chunk down and go further in the detail, but when it is the appropriate moment. And I would say, yeah, deep questioning is more when we have doubts regarding the strategy, and chunk up question is more about equilibrating the group activity. So questioning skills was the second finger. The third finger would be having in mind what are the values and beliefs of our participants, of our group, because this is where we can work and cooperate together. I don't know why I do three like that. I do three like that, as your Italian, not American, do. And of course, yeah, because what you can do is work on the common beliefs. For example, in Erasmus Plus program, we value diversity. We think that diversity is a value. Or we think that democracy is a value and we want to be active citizens. We do believe that on a certain degree, and that's why we work in the frame of this program. This is where we can act together. So having clear values and shared values and beliefs. So the fourth area of a facilitator, the fourth communication skills, is flexibility. I think in social work and youth work, this is very, very, very important to be flexible. I think Miss Lynn agrees. I job shadowed her, and I consider her a flexible person, able to improvise her day schedule. And because of course, when you work with youth, when you work with people, there is a large amount of things you did not expected, because you work with people, right? You don't work with numbers and Excel file, at least not only. So flexibility is really, really valuable also when communicating. But every time we should, I think, have in mind what are the outcome that we expect in an organizational level, of course, or in a personal level, if it's about communicating on a more personal level. And last but not the least, to facilitate every process, I don't think, fifth, according to this model, the fifth skills useful for facilitating would be the sensory acuity. So our observation skills. So when we are working with a group of people, being aware of the group dynamics, what the group is paying attention to, what the group is not paying attention to, especially when it comes about non-formal education, for example, or who has the authority, who doesn't have the authority, who has a space to express, and who is not heard. So, of course, the facilitator should be always sensing and listening to his audience in order to facilitate the communication, and also in order to prevent any conflict and create as much as possible a positive environment to work together. So I think we have just 7 more minutes, and I don't know. I feel like I've talked for a very long time. If you have any question, if you are interested in in some of the topic that we explored. So we talked about cross-cultural differences according to Hofstede studies, emotional intelligence, and that was based on Goleman book that is called Emotional Intelligence, and Salto project on emotional intelligence and why it is important for youth workers and for youth in general. Then we talk about the reasons of the conflict and how the conflict can escalate in different levels or de-escalate in different levels according to the way we communicate. So if we communicate in the proper way, then the conflict de-escalates. And how can we communicate in the proper way? So we said we can use iMessages, we can use active listening, and we can learn how to give a very constructive feedback. And the two, active listening and constructive feedback, are the one I suggested you to simply Google, because there is a lot of content about this. Then ultimately we talked about the Steel Manning technique, which is a technique for debating that is based on the sincere attempt to understand the argument of your opponent, and not to make a parody of it or to diminish its position, but instead to make your opponent's argument as strong as you can. Since your opponent says, thank you, I wish I could phrase it like that. And then you can argue with that and make your own point stronger than before. Sorry. And ultimately, we talk about the 5-finger model, which is a model based on 5 skills that can be useful when it comes about communication if you are a facilitator. So if you are a facilitator in youth work, social work, but I would say for everyone, those are very, very good skills. So I will wait for some question. We can use the chat group, or if you have a micro, we can also use a micro. Thank you very much for listening to this webinar.
Do you want to ask me any question?
Oh, there are also reactions on Zoom. So since we have 2 more minutes, I will say what is a constructive feedback. So a very popular technique in giving constructive feedback is the hamburger method. So basically, when delivering the feedback, in order for it to be constructive, you should introduce your message with a positive feedback, and then give the actual feedback you would like to communicate, and then conclude with another positive feedback. That will make that your introduction is the bread, and then there is the meat, that is the actual feedback that you would like to deliver, and then there is the conclusion that is a positive message. And also there are plenty of worksheets and examples on the web that are very worth to explore, I think. And when it comes about active listening, can we find all the materials on Salto? Some of the materials can be found on Salto. I suggest you to Google so emotional intelligence and conflict management, and then you will find some tools that are useful. The majority of the content I used for this webinar, I found that on Salto into one manual and a booklet of Erasmus Plus projects. For Steel Manning and 5-finger model, I found that on the YouTube. So if you want that content, I can share you the link with pleasure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and also I think I will stop here. I will not bother you with my definition of active listening because it's really easy to find. Thank you very much for this chat. Thank you for participating to everyone, and so Happy New Year from Hanoi, Vietnam, since here we are at the end of 2019. And
But
yeah, we are really in a time limbo here.
do you have structure?
Thank you very
Do you
much.
have the structure of the webinar, or do we need to make any report from it, Costa Rica?
So I think that the webinar will be published on the project website. And I wanted to ask to Costa Rica if some of the sources can be also shared on the website. So it
because if we don't need to make any report for the webinar.
As far as I know, we will not, the participant don't have to.
Only the report. Okay.
Okay, so if anyone has other question, I don't think so. So thank you very much again from.
Thank you very much. See you in Hanoi.
That's very shy.
Can you leave it?
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy Lunar New Year.
Happy Lunar New Year.